I'm aware that I might be a lot of people's only exposure to somebody who's blind or disabled. I might be the only blind person they see, and they might have low expectations of somebody who's blind. If I can surprise people and challenge people, then the next time they encounter somebody that's blind, maybe they have slightly higher expectations. Maybe they talk to them differently. Maybe they talk to them and not the person they're with. It's far healthier to make people forget about the one thing that they think defines you than bash them over their heads with it all the time.
Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan Guru-Murthy, and this is the podcast in which we talk to extraordinary people about the big ideas in their lives and the events that have helped shape them. My guest today is one of the country's most loved comedians, Chris McCausland, who is now perhaps best known as the first blind contestant on Strictly Come Dancing and the show's 2024 champion. His famous waltz with dancer Diane Buswell even won a Bafta as the most memorable moment on TV. Now, Chris started losing sight as a young boy due to a genetic condition and was fully blind by his early 20s. But he has never let disability define him. In his latest autobiography, Keep Laughing, he details his journey as a boy from Liverpool who goes on to win the hearts of the nation. Chris, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, nice one, mate.
We always want to start this podcast by asking people if you could wave a magic wand and change the world, what would you do?
You know, a lot of the people that are trying to change the world are trying to change the world in a way that's not very healthy for most people.
Yeah.
So let's wave a wand. Let's sort their heads out. Yeah. And hopefully the world will be happier for everybody. I just think we just need more tolerance, don't we? Really, that's it. More tolerance for other people that aren't like ourselves.
More understanding.
Yeah.
I mean, when you talk about...
I am a comedian, though, by the way.
Yeah.
It's quite a deep question for that. I don't know if you know if you've booked here.
Well, the thing is about comedy on the TV now, a lot of it is topical and political.
Yeah.
And panel shows are all topical and political. And you're not a political comedian.
No. But I do love doing Have I Got News for You, you know. So I love the challenge of it. And I love the fact that you start the week with nothing. And I really put the work in, you know. I read the papers online, and I come up with a list of ideas and an awareness of what's going on and some jokes, and I instantly forget 80% of it. But it makes me feel prepared. And then, you know, doing things like Have I Got News for You, a lot of the funny stuff happens in the room. It just comes from having the conversations and you know, trying to make things silly. And that's what I try and do on that, really, is try and make things silly, try and bring a little bit of daftness into it, and take the mickey out of everybody rather than turning up with agendas and opinions and trying to bash people over the heads with them.
But I wonder whether you think the industry forgets that that's actually what people like. Because if you think about, you know, the Michael McIntyres of this world, you know, wholesome comedians, if you like, family comedians, who often get the mickey taken out of them by other people on the comedy circuit.
For not being clever enough, for not being original enough, you know, and ultimately people want to laugh and they want a holiday from what you do, Krishnan.
I want a holiday from what I do.
Yeah, but you know, there's so much happening in the world that people don't want to be reminded about when they go out to have a laugh. And Michael does that very well.
You talk about him actually in the book as somebody you really admire.
Yeah. I mean, so like I grew up getting into comedy throughout the 90s, and throughout the 90s, you know, all my favorite comedians were people like Jack Dee and Alan Davis and Frank Skinner, and then Eddie Izzard and people like that. And these were comedians that talked about anything and everything, and there was never a theme to a show. They were never bashing you over the head with opinions. It was never topical. It was always just funny because it was funny. It was like a smorgasbord of ideas and comedy. And you know, I think what we found in comedy, especially as the number of comedians has increased on the circuit and Edinburgh's played a bigger part in it, a lot of comedians start tours off with shows that they've written for the Edinburgh Fringe, which the way you make yourself stand out at the Edinburgh Fringe is you write something with a theme, you write something with a point, you try and make yourself different to what everybody else is doing. And it has its value in Edinburgh, and it's proven to have its value for a lot of comedians, but ultimately I think more often than not, it's not what travels the best outside of that fringe environment. What travels the best is that comedy that I grew up loving throughout the 90s, which isn't really about anything. And so that's what I love. That's what Michael loves, Michael McIntyre, and doing the circuit. Michael's one of those comedians that I did a lot of the clubs with before he went stratospheric, and he was always the best comedian on the bill. He was always the comedian that would get the best response, and he was always, I think, he would always be different every set, and I really admired that and I appreciated that. And it was, again, the comedy that I grew up loving,
I mean, did you ever think that doing Strictly would be transformational for your comedy career? I mean, it's been transformational for your life, I suppose, in lots of different ways, and we can talk about that. But when you decided to do it, did you think this will be a good career move?
No, I thought it was going to be a disaster. I thought it could be a disaster, and I thought the chances of it being a disaster were far greater than the chances of it being a success. And it was representation's only positive if it's good. It's only positive representation if it sends out a good message. If I go on Strictly and it's a disaster, it does nobody any good. And I didn't know really what it was I was being asked to do. I didn't understand what the show was beyond the fact it's a dancing show. It's hard to explain.
Because you'd never seen it?
No, never seen it. So you don't know how technical it is. You don't know how good it is, how good the good people are, how bad the bad people are. You don't know how fast they're moving on the floor, really what the lifts are. You can't describe them in any way that compares to looking at a video. And so I was asked a few times and I said no, because there was fear, there was the unknown, and there was the idea that I'd just come off the back of a tour that ended at the Shepherd's Bush Empire, which, it was a decent tour. I was playing to 1,000-seater rooms, and I'd built an audience up by being funny, by being on shows that people liked the comedy that I did. And then I was presented with this opportunity to jeopardize all of that, by doing something that could be a failure in a way that made people feel sorry for me. Because if I go on to listen, I was on with Paul Merson. Paul Merson was brilliant to do it with. Yeah, he was such a funny bloke. But he was always, people would say about him, his dancing was a bit goofy dad dancing or whatever. And people can go on Strictly and not do as well as other people, and can kind of maybe be the butt of a joke along the way. Anyone can be kind of susceptible to that. But whereas if I went on it and it didn't go well, it was more than that. It was that it could have been a disaster. How do I know if I can do it? How do I know that Diane wouldn't have, my dancer wouldn't have clattered into me on the dance floor, that we would have got the angles wrong and danced off the floor, that we would have kind of hit a camera? There's so many things that are beyond a bit of goofy dad dancing. And if I went on that in front of 8 million people and it ended up like that, and people felt sorry for me, who wants to go and see a comedian they feel sorry for? So it runs the risk of jeopardizing.
Very high.
Yeah, jeopardizing that audience. And it was a real leap of faith to do it, and to kind of go, okay, well, we're going to gamble all of this on this opportunity to try and represent positively. And it was a gamble.
How quickly did you realise it wasn't? Because I think we all, to some degree or other, think doing Strictly is a big gamble. And for someone like me who's fundamentally serious, I'd always been warned that it would be a gamble, and that's partly why I hadn't done it in the past. But almost as soon as I started doing it, after that first week, I thought, this is going to be fine. If you're just honest and open about who you are and what you're doing,
and once you saw what the competition was like,
exactly, it's going to be okay. And I remember I texted you, I think, in your first week, after your first week, and said you're going to win. And I kind of thought that immediately after I saw you on that first dance. So did you know very quickly this was going to be fine?
So I first of all, I had no experience of the show, so I didn't really understand how the show worked in terms of what part of the audience played in it, to what extent the viewers at home really decided who was going to do well in that show, and that it wasn't necessarily all about being the best dancer. I didn't really appreciate that until I was in it. When we started, so as you know, you do this first opening episode, which is where you all get paired off and you do a group dance. I found out later after that, Diane told me, me and Diane, we talk all the time, we've come out of it so close, and she told me that after that first group dance, she went up and she cried. Because she said to me, I just thought you would be better. So there was this moment where we started, and I was trying to find my feet, and she didn't realize what a challenge she had ahead of her, and we started off in this first live episode, the most terrifying thing I have ever done in my life, by the way. And we started off, and I said to her, listen, I don't want this dumbing down, because the only reason I'm here is to show people that this is possible, that more is possible than they would think, and ultimately that more is possible than I would think. We need to be doing everything else everything that everybody else is doing. And she said, I couldn't agree more. So let's go out all guns blazing. She goes, what we're going to do this first dance, I'm going to do a cartwheel. You're going to catch me leg in midair. You're going to pull it. I said, hang on a minute. But that's what we did. We went out to smash people over the head with it and go, look at what is possible. And that first dance that you're on about, we did this cha-cha-cha to twist and shout. She did a cartwheel. In training, she kicked me in the head so hard, by the way, because that's how you practice a cartwheel, is by doing the cartwheel. And I did joke with her that if she thought I was hiding any level of eyesight, I took that foot in the face without flinching, right? But we did these things, these set pieces, that if they'd have gone wrong on the telly, it was game over. There's no way you can recover from a cartwheel flying kick in the head. We did this move where she fell backwards and I caught her and I dragged her back into the middle of the dance floor and swung her legs while stepping over her legs, swinging underneath me like a helicopter. And these were things that were hit and miss during training. And we trained in this empty room where I could hear her breathing and talking and counting, and then you're in this environment with a screaming audience and a band, and you go, how is this even possible in that environment? And it was, and it couldn't have gone better for what we needed out of it, and for the impact that it had, and how the audience, how it connected with the audience at home. We got 23 out of 40 points. It could have gone better in terms of points, but it couldn't have gone better for what it was and what it represented. And we came out of that, and my first reaction was, oh, God, I got away with that, didn't I? How the hell do we do that again? Because it felt like it was so trying to keep hold of a runaway horse. You're literally been bowled along by this song and by the energy of it and the nerves and the fear. And you come out of it, and you don't come out of it feeling, oh, I controlled that and I nailed that, bring it on. You come out of it going, how do I do that again?
Yes.
Again, how do we do that another time?
Starting from scratch with something completely different, yeah. I mean, what do you see in your mind's eye when it comes to dance? I mean, like, what was your concept of dance? Having, I suppose your images of dance must have been pretty dim and distant memories, and I'm guessing you probably didn't watch Angela Rippon on Come Dancing as a little kid. So did you even know what a foxtrot looks like?
No, not at all. No, and I knew what ballroom was in terms of the very primitive hold of it. I remember watching, ironically, Al Pacino playing a blind man, but doing a tango, was it, on Scent of a Woman, and there's a bit of dancing in Pulp Fiction, isn't there? But and there's a bit of what you'd probably call 1950s rock and roll, possibly jive dancing going on in Back to the Future when they do the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. But they're just kind of vague, faded memories of people dancing. I had no idea what a jive was, what a samba was, what a salsa was, what the difference between a foxtrot and I'd never even heard of American Smooth, So all of these things were so foreign to me.
Could you picture what you and Diane looked like?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, we've we've said that, if I ever, if there's ever anybody, a clever guy in a white coat with a clipboard that manages to cure my eyesight condition, me and Diane are going to sit down and watch what we were able to do, because it's hard to picture in me head what it was that we did in some of them, what it looked like, and how magical they make it look with the visual effects and the settings and the costume and the makeup and the hair, and all of these people, they do such a phenomenal job on that show. But yet my only experience of it really is in my imagination and from the moves that we were doing, but not really how the audience, experienced it, which is what it's all about, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not often that I feel left out visually. I'm used to not being able to see things. I love football. I haven't been able to watch football in ages, but I don't usually feel left out. I'm just used to listening to it. But, going on and doing that show, which is so visual, and being I've never felt part of something that was such a machine, so many moving parts working towards making this same great show every Saturday, part of a team like that, such a big team, but also so left out of what the experience was, because everybody else can watch everybody else's dances. Everybody else can go, oh, well done, that was great, you did really well, I loved what you did, that lift was phenomenal. I had no idea what anyone else was doing. I'd joke with Diane and people that I'd stand up at the top in Claudia's area, and I remember Pete Wicks doing whatever dance he did to "Breathe" by the Prodigy, and it finished and everybody applauded him, and I said to Di, God, the band's amazing, aren't they? I said, it sounds just like the Prodigy. How did they do that? Because that's what I was listening to. Yeah. And we'd go through the show, and by the time you get to week 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, everybody else has got an idea of what the dances are that they're doing, because they've seen other people doing them.
You learn from them.
Yeah, you learn from what you watch, what makes a good Charleston, what makes a passable Charleston. I had no idea every Monday, and we'd start by having to explain what the dance was from the very basic building blocks, and it took a lot of time, a lot of trust, a lot of effort. But it paid off, didn't it?
I don't know how you did it in the time, because I used to struggle with the time that we had enormously, and the idea of actually not having any concept of, not being able to just say, just put your foot there, and being able to put your foot there.
Well, you just put. I mean, you have to put the hours in. I cleared my diary for much of it. I trusted implicitly that Diane was not going to make me look stupid, and she'd always be where she needed to be. She trusted implicitly that I would always put 100% in, because you can't pull it off if you're putting 90% in. You can't, you need to be, you can't hold off in the momentum if you're going to do a lift, because I'm unsure that it's going to work. I need to trust implicitly that this lift is going to work.
And is that something, is trust something that comes easily for you? Because I would imagine it's quite hard to trust.
Well, I always have to trust. I always have to trust that, that the person that's guiding me is not going to walk me into something. I always have to trust that whatever clothes I buy kind of look okay, does it look all right? Does it, does this match this? Is this? The number of times I asked my daughter, she's on her iPad and she's playing Roblox or something, and I'll say to her, "Is this jumper clean?" And she'll go, "Yeah," and I can tell she hasn't moved her head. I can. I said, "You didn't even look at me." She said, "I did look at you." I said, "I can hear that your voice has not changed from looking at the screen," So you always trusting that people are, giving you the right information and on your side to some extent. And but this was a real leap because of the jeopardy in it, and we trusted each other implicitly.
How did you prepare yourself psychologically for losing your sight? Because it happened over many years.
Over 25 years, I'd say. Yeah. You can't. You're just in it as it's happening. I always think of it as like the frog in the water. That you don't notice the temperature changing for the frog, and you don't notice the eyesight deteriorating. You only notice that it used to be better than it is now. And so there's never a moment of reckoning, you know. There's swings and roundabouts, pluses and negatives to everybody's experiences. That, you know, that you can be blind from birth. I'm glad I could see, but somebody blind now at my age will be a completely different animal to I am. You know, a different level of independence and competence to what I've got out and about in the world. But, you know, I'm glad I used to be able to see.
Yeah.
It's a completely different experience to somebody who loses their eyesight in an instant or in a very, very quick period of time, because they have this, you know, for simplicity, they have an accident and lose their sight. They have a moment of reckoning that they have to come to terms with. And I can only imagine that the trauma there is immense, is the grief, the loss that they have to come to terms with in a day, in a week, is a lot. But they have this moment where they go, well, I've got the pre-blindness identity, and now this new blind identity, and I need to adjust to it. When you're losing your sight really, really gradually, you never have that. You're always kind of living in denial, and you're always really living in the belief that you can still see more than you can, because you're always psychologically playing catch up to the reality, if that makes sense to you.
Yes.
Yeah. So it leads to a lot of denial. It leads to a lot of resistance to the identity of being blind.
Resentment?
I'd say frustration. Yeah, frustration. I'd say I was never really angry, and I was never really resentful. But certainly you would have periods of frustration, a lot of frustration along the way, when you're realizing that you can't do the things that you're struggling now to do, things that you used to be able to do. And especially when you have to relinquish a lot of aspects of yourself along the way, you know, a lot of things that define your identity. So I used to love playing football. You know, when you stop being able to play football, it's a huge part of your social life that you have to let go of.
Yeah.
You know, when you stop being able to walk independently at night time, it is a huge part of your independence that you have to let go of, and so on. So there's always these things that happen at different stages. When you stop being able to see the TV to enjoy watching comedy and sitcoms and things like that. All these things happen at different times. So you're always letting go of different aspects of yourself at these different times.
You talk in the book about school a bit, and about how other kids treated you, and also another kid who was at school with you, who also had a visual impairment. And you think they were sort of meaner to him than they were to you?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So, like, I mean, I went to a number of specialist schools over my, you know, when I was a kid through to completion of A levels. But when I was very young, I was at the mainstream infant and primary school in the part of Liverpool where I'm from, and growing up with kids as my eyesight deteriorated, you know, I couldn't see what was on the blackboard and things like that. It was never an issue, and partly because I think kids, you know, it takes a while for meanness to develop in kids, doesn't it? But also I was part of the furniture, and as my eyesight was deteriorating and I was acclimatizing to it at that young age, so were they, and so it was always just normal within that context for everybody. But then I remember being about 7 or 8, and another kid joined in our class who had these big, thick bottle top glasses on, you know, and he kind of squinted through them and you know, looked at things a bit goofily and things, and everybody was about 7 or 8 years old by this point, and they were really quite mean to him, and they take the mickey out of him, and it was because he was different to them. I'd say more so than I was, because I wasn't visually different to them. He had these big thick glasses on, and they take the mickey out of him, and they make chants up about him and things like that, and were quite mean. But he was also new, and you know, he was a new addition. He wasn't part of the furniture, and so yeah, it really, you know, I always wondered like how much that affected me. Those kids being mean to him, and I think it obviously did, because I still remember it, you know, and it still makes me feel uncomfortable now, thinking about that, and that I kind of didn't stand up for him in a way, because I didn't want the same fate to be kind of bestowed upon myself. But I also think it maybe just kind of created its own little bit of real estate in my brain that made me kind of concerned about being the new guy in other environments when I became older.
What did you think you were going to do when you were a kid?
When I was a kid, in terms of a job and all that, I always loved space. I mean, I wanted to be. If I'm honest, like, I think the naivety of sight loss when I was really young, I wanted to be a snooker player. That was the first thing. I loved snooker. I used to watch it on the telly, listen on the radio, if people remember that, when snooker was on the radio. Oh, it was fantastic. I loved snooker, and I loved playing it. And then my eyesight got worse, and I had to move to pool, and then chess. But outside of that, I loved space. I always kind of had this idea of being an astronomer or something like that. I followed the path of least resistance, really, in just the things I had aptitudes for, with the geeky things, and in terms of the subjects that you presented with at school, rather than these hobbies that space was really. Was maths and then computers.
Yeah.
And so I just.
So you might have ended up in tech.
Yeah. I mean, my degree's in software engineering, so I certainly tried to end up in tech, but as I said, the remains of my eyesight deteriorated early 20s to 25, and that's when I was qualified in software engineering, and I was trying to get a job whilst also learning how to be completely blind. I was trying to get a job in computers whilst also learning how to use a computer completely differently to how I'd been using a computer throughout the previous 10, 12 years. So yeah, it was difficult to follow that path at that point.
You also had a sort of a slightly surprising attempt at joining the security services.
Well, maybe I did.
Tell me about it. Maybe you did.
Yeah. No. Well, as I said, so I was unemployed. I was applying for jobs in computers, and accessibility. First of all, I think the obligations and the desires for companies to hire people with a disability are so different now to what they were 25 years ago, and also the obligations and the desire for accessibility within computer systems are so vastly different now to what they were 25 years ago. And so, I'm learning how to use a computer that talks rather than using a computer with magnified text on the screen. But in order for, really quickly to explain it, like if you've got software that magnifies text on the screen, it just magnifies whatever's on the screen. It's irrelevant what's on the screen. It will make it bigger. If you're using a computer that is reading things out to you, you need the systems on the computer, the operating system, the applications, the websites, to be made with accessibility in mind, or the computer doesn't know what it's meant to be reading to you. And so I was finding that I was trying to learn how to use a computer that talks, and also get a job in computing when nothing was made with accessibility in mind. You go for an interview at BAE Systems, and all of their work would be hidden behind a highly secure intranet wall, but none of their systems were accessible. And so it was like banging your head against a brick wall. And I started applying for mad things that were nothing to do with computers, and one of them was MI5. And they were recruiting, in their words, spies. And I applied for that just as a bit of a joke, really.
But they took it seriously.
Well, I mean, I took it seriously, but I didn't expect to get anywhere, I mean, I didn't expect. I just applied because it was there. It surprised me that it was something you could fill a form out to become. You think you're going to be a spy, you have to solve a particularly cryptic puzzle in the back of an obscure magazine, and they hunt you down, they track you down, and offer you the job. There's a graduate scheme, and I applied thinking, well, this would be interesting, but I got down to the last 1%. 30 out of 3,000 applicants. I was in the last 30. before I like to say they came to their senses. So but no, I mean that was fun.
But you conclude that experience by basically saying they were right.
Well,
because of your blindness, and I found that surprising.
So partly yes, and partly I'm joking to some extent. Part of the job. Listen, I'm of the opinion that not everything has to be for everybody. Yeah, there are things in this world that aren't for me, and I'm fine with that. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm happy that I live in a. You don't need to audio describe ballet to me. Ballet is something that isn't for me. It's a visual art form. It's a visual medium. People like it, go and watch ballet. You don't need to make that accessible for me. There are things in this world that aren't for me. I did this whole recruitment process for MI5. Part of that job involved identifying a terror threat and being swamped with information and having to identify this threat and procure the services of the surveillance teams and identify this threat before a terror attack was carried out. Now, I'm quite happy with them saying to me that my eyesight is a problem in that, because if it takes me longer than somebody else, there's a thing where you're entitled to 50% extra time in exams, or companies have to make reasonable adjustments for disability. I'm all for that, but terrorists don't. They don't give you 50% extra time before they blow something up, So I'm quite comfortable with them saying there's a problem with you not being able to see here because you're not as quick as everybody else. And I can joke by going, thank God for that. I don't want to live in a country that would give me that job where I can't even play I Spy. So there's a joke element to it.
But I wonder whether other employers might use the same thing, less justifiably.
Yeah, I mean, do I think that there should be diversity in all walks of life? Yeah. Do I think that there should be blind people working behind the scenes in our security services, in MI5, in the police? Yeah. Why not? But not in a role that has risk attached to it, in terms of if you are slower or miss something, that it can be detrimental to people's lives, which it would have been. I'm quite happy to go, yeah, fair enough. There's a problem there, isn't there? There's a conflict of ability and what the role is. So, yeah, I think that, we're back to the whole thing with Strictly. Representation is important, but it's only beneficial if it's positive and if it's good. Not if too many allowances are having to be made to make it work. Not if people can see through the smoke and mirrors to go, this is not as good as everybody else. This is not. I need to be represented in a way where I'm as good as the person next to me, where I am surprising people, and I think if I can do that on the for example on the telly, I'm aware that I might be a lot of people's only exposure to somebody who's blind or disabled. I might be the only blind person they see, and they might have, as a lot of people do, some quite kind of low expectations of somebody who's blind. If I can surprise people and challenge people, then the next time they encounter somebody that's blind, maybe they have slightly higher expectations. Maybe they talk to them differently. Maybe they talk to them and not the person they're with. Maybe when somebody's recruiting in work, in a company, they have a higher expectation of somebody with a disability. There's positive aspects to representation, but it has to be done well. And I think that also applies within the workplace. You need to be performing at the same level as the people next to you. Otherwise, it doesn't filter through,
So what about the turn to comedy then? How did that happen?
Well, comedy was always something I'd loved. I was a massive fan of comedy, and right the way through the 90s, as I said, I loved stand-up, loved sitcoms, loved sketch comedy. I grew up watching comedy on the telly before I even really realised that I liked comedy. You watch your mum and dad shows, that are family entertainment shows that are on the telly, all hosted by comedians and entertainers and things like that. And I just grew up with it, loved it. I decided to see if I could write 5 minutes of stand-up. Just as I wonder if I can come up with 5 minutes that I think is funny with no real intention of trying comedy. Just I wonder if I can write 5 minutes of comedy. And I wrote it, and then you look at it and you go, I have no idea if this is funny. And, you know, I'm sure you've got friends and family, yeah? Where, if you do something that is a little bit of a risk, yeah, is a little bit kind of risky, and it's embarrassing. If there's a chance that it could be embarrassing, your friends and family are the last people you would tell about it, because they'd never let you forget about it. If I was to go to my mates, oh, I've written 5 minutes of comedy, will you tell me if it's funny? You'd never hear the end of it. Yeah, it would be. If that was the only exposure you had to whether you thought something was funny, they'd still be talking about it in the pub 25 years later. Well, remember when you came to us with us stand-up? Oh, it was shit, wasn't it? So the irony is that as terrifying as trying stand-up was, it was a far more desirable risk.
And that was going to be the most, I suppose,
how do I know
objective judge of whether it was funny or not.
How do I know if this is funny? Well, the only thing you can do is try it in a room full of strangers, because it sure beats showing it to your mates or showing it to your family. And so it was a risk to do it just once and have a go. And obviously you do it once and then you go, I wonder if I can get more laughs next time. I wonder if I can do better next time. And then that's what the bug is, the comedy bug. People talk about catching the comedy bug. It's the desire to do it again and again and improve. And then that you become part of the community, the stand-up comedy open mic community. And there's real development that is all down to your own steam, your own desire, your own effort. But even from that very first gig, I wanted to represent myself in a way that surprised people. So I didn't do jokes about being blind. I did stand-up that was the kind of comedy I grew up loving, that was about everything and anything, really. And it was to represent myself in a way that made people forget that I was blind. And I think there's, a psychologist would have a field day with this. I was trying to make myself forget. I probably was. I was still becoming comfortable in my own skin. I was still a long way off that at the age of 26, 27, 28. But I also think that it's far healthier to make people forget about the one thing that they think defines you than bash them over the head with it all the time. You normalize it more, I think.
And what is it that you most love about it? Is it the relationship with the audience? Is it, where's the buzz in the bug?
So, I mean, for me, there's two sides to it. Like the stand-up side of it, it's kind of water off a duck's back now, really. It's such a natural environment for me that it's the enjoyment of having people laugh at the show and have people come along and get a babysitter and want to spend the night with me doing stand-up for them. What a privileged position to be in. It's a joy to get to do that. It doesn't kind of strike the fear into me, that a lot of people would think comedy is. I'm sure you don't really get nervous going on to do the news, do you? It's just what you do. I'm sure the first time you did a live broadcast, you were cacking yourself, weren't you? But it becomes second nature to you. But what it does is it opens doors to other things that are outside of your comfort zone. And those things are, the first time I did Have I Got News for You? Oh, God, terrified because, as you said, I'm not political, but also terrified that I would say something that was stupid. It wasn't even just not being funny. It was saying something that was stupid, and then Ian Hislop ripping me a new one in such a hilarious way that it had to make the edit. As it happens, Ian Hislop is absolutely bloody lovely. But now, Have I Got News for You is I get a bit of anticipatory nerves because you don't know what's coming up, but there's an enjoyment to it for me. But you're always being asked to do things that are outside of your comfort zone, and that's where I get a lot of the adrenaline from, is taking these risks, and there was no bigger risk than Strictly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Strictly has opened lots of other doors for you, I suppose, and that you will now be asked to do everything from documentary to light entertainment to everything else in between. Are you going with the ride, or do you have a plan?
I mean, for me, I think Jimmy Carr's got the right approach in that it doesn't matter what is happening for him in the world of TV, he will always carry on writing stand-up shows and doing stand-up, because it's the only thing that he is 100% in control of. And he's in charge of making sure his audience is there, that he's always in charge of having a career.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so I think that's the main thing for me, is to keep on doing what I love, which is stand-up. Without stand-up, I wouldn't have been getting anything on the telly. But then without getting the stuff on the telly, I'd still be doing the clubs. People wouldn't be coming to watch me do stand-up in theatres. And so it's a precarious house of cards. You want to keep it all standing. So keep on doing stand-up, and then just see really what comes up in the world of television to keep on really not only keeping a presence. You've got to maintain a presence, but also finding these things that allow you to grow and are outside of your comfort zone. So as you said, well, last year I did a chat show for ITV. Before I did Strictly, I wrote a film and made a film for Sky with Lee Mack. That was something I'd never done before, but all within the context of comedy. It's all within my wheelhouse, even though you're stretching yourself. As I say, Strictly was that one kind of anomaly that was so far. It was like its own island. It was in no way did I have any of those transferable skills to know that it would be a success. But getting to do things like, as you say, do a documentary and things like that. These are all incredible experiences, and I love doing them.
Well, long may you continue changing the world, even if you don't exactly want to, or loathe the people who do.
If I can carry on doing what I'm doing and hopefully represent positively, then hopefully that has a little trickle down, doesn't it, in my particular corner of the world, in terms of disability, blindness, and that's what I'll keep on trying to do.
Chris McCausland, thank you very much indeed.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you very much indeed for that. I hope you enjoyed watching that. If you did, then give us a rating or a review, and then other people will find the podcast. And you can watch all of these interviews on the Channel 4 News YouTube channel. Until next time, bye-bye.